I discovered my wife was having an affair with her best friend's husband, so I orchestrated a plan that exposed their dirty secret, destroyed their double lives, and sparked a fallout that turned everyone's world upside down. The betrayal game. My wife was secretly involved with her best friend's husband. So, I calmly set a snare to expose their affair, which triggered a cascade of completely unexpected events. I'm a 35-year-old man, and my wife, Sarah, who is 33, had been married for 6 years. We first met in college, dated for a couple of years, and then had a small wedding. We decided against having children, choosing instead to concentrate on our careers. I was routinely putting in over 60 hours a week at my engineering firm, while she was steadily advancing at a marketing agency. Our life seemed to be going well. We had a comfortable apartment in a desirable part of town, 2 cars, and an annual trip to a beach destination. It was the classic American dream, or so I believed. My days were spent designing commercial buildings, leaving me exhausted, and our weekends were typically spent with friends or catching up on Netflix. Nothing too exciting, but it functioned. Or so I thought. My daily routine involved waking up at 5:30 a.m., exercising by 6 a.m., and being at the office until 8 p.m. if I was fortunate. I was putting in the effort now so we could genuinely enjoy life later, establishing a strong foundation. Sarah initially appeared to be on the same page. She was ambitious, focused, and supportive. She'd prepare meals on Sundays, leave sweet little notes in my lunch, all those domestic gestures you see on Instagram. Then, about a year ago, things started to subtly shift. The meal prep ceased because she was suddenly too busy. The charming notes vanished. She began having more client dinners and team happy hours. I just figured she was networking, building her career, which was something we both desired. Our social circle was primarily made up of other couples, college friends, work associates, and neighbors. Among them were Julian, a 34-year-old man, and his wife, Diana, who was 33. We had met them at a charity event that Sarah had insisted I attend. Julian was a tall, perpetually tan sales director type who couldn't stop talking about his latest deals or vacations to Bali or whatever. One of those guys who wears loafers without socks and has unnervingly white teeth. Diana was his wife and supposedly Sarah's closest friend since high school. She was quiet, intelligent, always observant, and subtly attractive. Dinner at our place twice a month became a regular custom. Julian consistently brought some overpriced wine he endlessly discussed. It's a minor Bordeaux, a discovery through a client. You likely haven't heard of the vineyard. Yes, because ordinary individuals don't spend $200 on fermented grape juice, you pretentious fool. Diana usually brought homemade desserts and sat quietly, watching everyone. These dinners became increasingly odd over time. Julian would make understated criticisms of my career while looking at my wife across the table. Still at the same company, huh? He'd remark. Or he'd go on about his promotions and bonuses. After these dinners, Sarah would enthuse about how driven and accomplished Julian was. He just understands how the game is played, she'd say. I'd remind her that my stable employment was covering our mortgage, while Julian's sales role likely had him one difficult quarter away from being let go. She didn't particularly care for that observation. She kept pushing for more gatherings with just the 4 of us, declining other invitations. I just feel more comfortable with Julian and Diana, she'd assert. Of course you do. At one point, we were seeing them weekly. Dinners, drinks, even weekend trips to Julian's family cabin, which was actually just a luxurious vacation home his parents allowed him to use. I went along with it because it seemed to make Sarah happy, and keeping her content appeared to be important. The alterations in Sarah accumulated. A new wardrobe. Suddenly, her perfectly fine clothes were not on brand enough for her career. A new haircut, from long to that short, professional style favored by all the senior women at her agency. A new membership at some upscale gym. Then the late nights began. Not just occasionally, but 3 or 4 times a week. Big client pitch tomorrow. The team needs to finalize the campaign tonight. Always some excuse. She'd come home smelling of wine and the cologne they spray you with at department stores. Her texts became guarded, always angling the phone away from me. One night, I rolled over at 2 a.m. and she wasn't in bed. I found her in the living room, furiously texting someone. When I asked who, she startled as if I'd caught her robbing a bank. God, you scared me. Just work stuff. Work stuff at 2 a.m.? And a password suddenly appeared on her phone the next day. I was too consumed with building our future to truly investigate, and perhaps too trusting to perceive. Our conversations became superficial. How was your day? Fine. Busy. She stopped inquiring about my projects or my friends. She stopped sharing stories about her coworkers, except for her mentor, who was assisting her in navigating office politics. 3 guesses who that mentor was. Those twice-monthly dinners with Julian and Diana also changed. Julian started appearing in designer clothes. Diana grew even quieter, if that was even possible, observing Julian and Sarah with an unreadable expression. I caught them a few times, the lingering touches, the inside jokes, but I dismissed it. We'd been married for 6 years. We had history, plans, a joint checking account, for goodness sake. She wouldn't discard all that for some pompous guy in Gucci loafers, would she? I was mistaken, obviously, but I didn't realize how deeply mistaken until Diana decided to devastate all our lives on a random Tuesday afternoon. It commenced like any other day. I was immersed in structural calculations for a new high-rise when my phone vibrated. It was Diana. Odd. Need to talk. Not over phone. Riverside Cafe at 1 p.m. Important. We weren't exactly close, so this was out of the blue. Diana and I barely spoke one-on-one, always with Seraph and Julian present, but something about the text felt urgent. I stared at my screen for a minute, then replied with a simple okay. I informed my boss I had a personal emergency and left. Dave is understanding like that. He doesn't ask questions when you've put in enough 12-hour days to earn some leeway. I drove to the cafe, found Diana hidden in the back corner, giant sunglasses obscuring half her face, looking as though she hadn't slept in days. She didn't even look up when I sat down. "Thanks for coming," she said, her voice faint. "What's going on? Is everything okay?" I inquired. She got straight to the point. "Seraph and Julian have been sleeping together for 4 months." Just like that. No softening the blow. I remember feeling strangely calm, as if my brain needed a moment to process the information. She slid a manila folder across the table, finally removing those sunglasses. Her eyes were red and swollen. The folder was meticulously organized. Hotel receipts, screenshots of texts, photos of them entering hotels together with timestamps, times and dates that perfectly corresponded with Seraph's late meetings and work trips. One photo showed them kissing in his car in a parking garage. Another showed them entering the Marriott downtown. The texts were worse, explicit content I can't unsee, discussing what they'd done and would do next time, plans for vacations they'd take when they were finally free. Complaints about their spouses, me being dull and constantly working, Diana being overly attached and not ambitious enough. "How did you obtain all this?" I asked, my hands beginning to tremble as the gravity of the situation settled in. "That's a long story. It doesn't matter," Diana said. "I've suspected since Christmas, when I found a hotel key card in his jacket. He claimed it was from a business trip, but the hotel was downtown, 10 minutes from her house." She took a deep breath. "But that's not all. Julian's been embezzling from his company to pay for their activities." She produced another set of papers, expense reports, credit card statements, company financial records. Julian had been categorizing their hotel stays as client meetings, their dinners as business development, even jewelry for Seraph as client appreciation gifts. Tens of thousands of dollars over the past few months. "He's the finance director. Nobody questions his expenses," Diana explained. "But I handle our taxes, and the numbers weren't adding up. He's been keeping 2 sets of records." I stared at the evidence, feeling as though I'd been struck by a truck. 6 years of marriage, the house we were saving for, the children we'd planned to have once we were more settled. All utterly destroyed because my wife couldn't remain faithful with her best friend's husband. "Why are you showing me this?" I finally asked, looking up from the damning proof. Diana's expression hardened. "Because you deserve to know. And because I'm tired of being made a fool of. They've been ridiculing us, Gavin, having their enjoyment while we worked and supported them." I remembered all those evenings, the inside jokes, the lingering glances, how Julian would offer to help Seraph with dishes while I was stuck conversing with Diana. They weren't even subtle. They were simply counting on us being too trusting or too foolish to notice. "There's more," Diana continued, lowering her voice. "They've been planning to leave us. Julian's been transferring money, setting up accounts I can't access. They were going to catch us both off guard, probably after the company's fiscal year ends when Julian gets his bonus." The anger finally hit me, a surge of fury that blurred my vision. That's why Seraph had been urging me to put more into our joint account. She'd been setting me up. Diana nodded. "Julian asked me last week to add her as an authorized user on our American Express. He said it was for office expenses. I pretended to agree, but never did it." We sat in silence for a minute, 2 individuals whose lives were imploding in the exact same manner at the exact same moment, caused by the exact same 2 people. It was almost comical in a darkly ironic way. "What are you going to do?" I asked her. "I've already contacted a lawyer. Filing for divorce tomorrow and anonymously sending evidence of the embezzlement to his company's board," she said, her voice now steady and resolute. "He believes I'm just the trophy wife who doesn't comprehend finances. He's about to discover how mistaken he is." I nodded, a strategy already forming in my mind. "I appreciate you doing this." "Thank you, Diana." I took the folder, and we parted ways with an awkward half-hug that somehow felt appropriate for 2 people bound by mutual betrayal. I didn't return to work. I called in sick for the rest of the day and drove directly to my bank instead, my mind racing with everything I needed to accomplish. No dramatic confrontation yet, just calculated action. I had only one thought. They had underestimated the wrong engineer. First stop, the bank. I opened a new account solely in my name and redirected my direct deposit to it. Then I transferred most of our savings, the funds I'd been accumulating for a house down payment, into that new account. I left enough in the joint account to avoid immediate suspicion. Seraph rarely reviewed our finances anyway. That was my responsibility. Her error. Next, I contacted all our credit card companies and removed her as an authorized user where possible. For joint cards, I reduced credit limits and requested transaction alerts. I called our investment firm and froze our brokerage account. 6 years of savings were not going to fund her new life with that arrogant Julian. My final financial step was to withdraw $2,000 in cash, emergency money, in case things became complicated. Never underestimate what a desperate cheater might do when cornered. By 3 p.m., I had secured our finances. My next task was to find a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, I wanted a fierce advocate. I didn't desire reconciliation or couples therapy. I wanted out with minimal detriment to my finances and sanity. I called Bobby, my college friend who had navigated a difficult divorce last year. He didn't ask questions, simply gave me his lawyer's number and said, "Call her now. Tell her I referred you, and it's an emergency. Let's call her Jessica." She answered on the second ring. No receptionist, no waiting. I provided her with the essentials. 6-year marriage, no children, unfaithful wife, financial concerns. She scheduled me for that same afternoon. She wasn't what I expected. In her mid-40s and direct. She laid it out plainly. In our state, adultery doesn't carry much legal weight unless it involves squandering marital assets, which, thanks to Diana's evidence, we could prove it did. Hotel rooms, gifts, dinners, all marital assets wasted on the affair. Jessica took copies of everything from Diana's folder and developed a strategy. She cautioned me to act normally for a few days while she prepared the paperwork. I left her office with a $5,000 retainer paid from my new private account and a clear plan. She'd have the divorce papers ready in 48 hours, and we'd arrange for Seraph to be served at work for maximum impact. Harsh, perhaps, but so was betraying your best friend's husband for 4 months. I left Jessica's office at 6 p.m. and realized I couldn't go home, couldn't look at Seraph without wanting to shatter her world. So, I texted her that I was working late and headed to Bobby's place. Bobby lives in a 2-bedroom bachelor pad downtown. When I arrived with a duffel bag, he simply nodded, handed me a soda, and sat me down. That's true friendship. No questions, just support when you're falling apart. That night was difficult. Bobby went out to give me space, and I sat on his balcony, just thinking, scrolling through pictures on my phone. Seraph and I in Thailand last year, at my parents' anniversary, building that IKEA bookshelf that nearly ended our marriage before the affair did. 6 years of memories, all tainted now, all wasted. For whom? For some flimsy individual with a fancy hairstyle. My phone was buzzing with texts from Seraph. Working late again? There's leftover pasta. Are you coming home soon? Want to watch that show? Everything okay? You're being quieter than usual. Each message fueled my anger. The casual normality of it all while she was leading a double life. I didn't respond. Let her wonder. Instead, I texted my boss that I needed a few personal days, then turned off my phone and opened the soda. Not my proudest moment, but sometimes you need to hit pause on life. I spent the next day organizing, making lists of shared property, accounts, insurance policies, changing passwords on my email, social media, cloud storage, backing up text messages, photos, and important documents. Methodical. When I turned my phone back on that evening, there were 28 missed calls and texts from Seraph, escalating from casual to concerned to furious. I sent one reply. Busy with work, staying at Bobby's to focus on project. Back in a few days. Her response was immediate. What project? Why didn't you tell me? This isn't like you. The irony of her saying what was like me after proving she never truly knew me at all. I didn't respond. By day 3, the divorce papers were finalized. Jessica had moved with incredible speed, preparing a filing that meticulously detailed Seraph's infidelity in clinical, humiliating terms. Dates, locations, expenses, all the evidence Diana had supplied, exposing the affair for what it was, a sordid, costly betrayal. Jessica arranged for a process server to deliver the papers to Seraph's office at 2 p.m. Perfect timing. Right after lunch, when the entire office would be present to witness it. Petty? Absolutely. Satisfying? Without a doubt. I positioned myself in a coffee shop across from her building, sipping an Americano while observing the entrance. At 1:58 p.m., I saw the process server enter, a professional-looking woman with a manila envelope. At 2:24 p.m., my phone exploded with calls from Seraph. It was done. I declined the calls and waited, watching. At 2:40 p.m., Seraph burst out of the building, mascara streaking down her face, phone pressed to her ear, likely calling Julian. I simply watched the whole spectacle with a smirk on my face, a strange sense of calm washing over me. The worst was over. That night, she found me at Bobby's place. I had no idea how she located me. Perhaps she called around to my friends. Bobby had gone out again, giving me privacy. The insistent knocking on the door began around 8 p.m. I knew it was her before I checked the peephole. She was a wreck, hair disheveled, makeup smeared, eyes red and swollen. I opened the door, but blocked the entrance with my body. There was no way she was coming inside. "How could you do this to me?" she shrieked, attempting to push past me. I didn't budge. "Serving me at work? Everyone saw. You humiliated me," she continued, voice cracking. I remained calm, which only intensified her anger. I told her to communicate through my lawyer from now on. She changed tactics, suddenly weeping, claiming it was all a mistake. Julian meant nothing. We could fix this. I laughed in her face, telling her I had all the texts where they planned their future together, the hotel receipts, the photos, everything. That's when she became frighteningly calm, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "This isn't over. You have no idea what you're doing." I closed the door in her face, her final words hanging in the air. Through the door, I heard her scream before her footsteps retreated down the hallway. That night, I slept soundly. My life was falling apart around me. Well, not exactly my entire life, but the unpleasant parts of it. Let it burn, yes, to Adele's melody. 3 days after serving Seraph the papers, Julian finally made his move. He decided to assert his authority. I was in the parking lot at work, heading to my car after a surprisingly productive day. I noticed him before he saw me, leaning against my car, attempting to appear casual in his expensive suit, checking his watch as if he had an important appointment. Just the sight of him made my blood boil. This was the individual who had been sleeping with my wife, indirectly spending my money and ridiculing me behind my back. I considered simply turning around and re-entering the building to avoid confronting him and potentially getting myself into legal trouble. But no, this was my car in my workplace parking lot. I wasn't about to be intimidated. As I approached, he straightened up, flashing that artificial sales smile that likely secured many deals and opened many doors. Up close, he looked worse than usual. His tie was slightly askew, and he had dark circles under his eyes. Apparently, Diana leaving him was taking its toll. "Good. We need to discuss the situation," he said, trying to sound reasonable. "It's gotten out of hand." I placed my laptop bag on the hood of my car, just staring at him, allowing the silence to become uncomfortable. A tactic I learned in negotiations: the first person to speak usually loses. He broke first, of course. "Look, man, I know you're upset, but these things happen. Marriages drift apart. People find connections elsewhere, and Seraph needed someone to satisfy her." "Really? These things happen," was his explanation for sleeping with my wife, as if it were a natural phenomenon. "Hurricane Julian makes landfall in my bedroom. News at 11. And satisfy her?" The moment those arrogant words left his lips, I decided to satisfy my fist by reshaping his face. One clean, satisfying punch, and he crumpled next to my car, holding his face. "Seraph's a mess," he whined, lowering his voice conspiratorially as if we were partners in crime. "Did you truly have to humiliate her at work?" "Oh, my mistake. The next time my wife cheats, I'll be sure to organize a celebratory parade for her instead." After a pause and some nervous glances from him, he finally spoke. "Look, man, the divorce papers," he said, getting to the core issue. "Some of those allegations are excessive. The financial matters especially." There it was. He wasn't there about Seraph at all. He was worried about the evidence of embezzlement detailed in the filing. "Spare me. I've seen the receipts, the dates, the text messages. Tell me, does your company know you're using their money to finance your affair?" He stood up and stepped closer. "You need to be very careful about making accusations. That's a dangerous path." I didn't retreat an inch. "Go ahead. Please give me a reason." He faltered, taking a half step back. For all his bravado, Julian was fundamentally a coward. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice hardening. "Seraph and I are both in trouble. I finished for him. How's Diana doing, by the way? Heard she's going for the house. You have a lovely wife." "Oh, my apologies. Ex-wife." That struck a nerve. Diana had apparently hired a formidable lawyer of her own, and Julian was facing the financial equivalent of a wood chipper. His momentary confusion confirmed he didn't know Diana and I were in communication. "Perfect. What did you just say? What exactly do you mean?" "Enjoy prison, Julian," I said, grabbing my laptop bag and unlocking my car. "Prison?" He laughed, but it sounded hollow. "For what? Having an affair isn't a crime." "Embezzlement is," I replied simply, getting into my car and driving away, leaving him standing in the parking lot, likely attempting to calculate precisely how ruined he was. Very ruined, as it turned out. That night, Diana came over to Bobby's place with dinner and a USB drive containing everything she'd collected on Julian's financial misconduct. We spread it all out on Bobby's dining table. He was out on a date, thankfully. Hotel receipts, expense reports, company credit card statements, fabricated client meeting notes, the complete package. She was the ideal partner for this retribution operation. Cool, methodical, and detail-oriented. She had an accounting degree and had worked in forensic accounting before marrying Julian. She knew exactly what to look for and how to present it in a way that would immediately trigger alarms with auditors. He's been doing this for years, she explained, pointing to patterns in the statements. Not just with Seraph. There were others before her, but he grew careless this time, spending more, taking greater risks. The affair had made him negligent, booking five-star hotels instead of his usual mid-range business accommodations, expensive dinners with multiple bottles of wine, even jewelry for Seraph listed as client gifts. Nearly $200,000 of company money over the past few years, with about $50,000 just during the months with Seraph. Why didn't you report him sooner? I asked, scrolling through a particularly damning spreadsheet she'd created. Diana offered a tight smile. I only put it all together recently, and honestly, I wanted to protect myself first, needed to secure my position before blowing the whistle. Smart woman. She'd already moved her personal assets, documented everything for her divorce, and positioned herself to be insulated from the fallout. Now she was ready to destroy everything. We spent hours organizing the evidence, creating a report that even an intern in accounting could comprehend. Phone records showing calls to Seraph during supposed client meetings. GPS data from his company car showing trips to hotels, not client offices. Bank statements showing cash withdrawals that corresponded with gifts Seraph had received. He always treated me like arm candy, Diana said as we prepared everything. The attractive trophy wife who managed the social calendar and looked good at company parties. He never realized I understood financial fraud better than he did. By midnight, we had compiled everything into a single encrypted file. Diana had created an anonymous email account using a VPN. The plan was straightforward. Send the evidence to Julian's company board, finance department, external auditors, and the SEC. Then wait. Are you sure about this? I asked her as my finger hovered over the send button. Once it's done, there's no turning back. Diana's face hardened. He stole from his company. That's not revenge. It's justice. She was right. This wasn't merely about retaliating for the affair anymore. Julian had committed actual crimes. We sent the email, then opened some drinks and waited. The response was quicker than we anticipated. The next morning, Diana received a call from a friend who worked in Julian's building. The company security team and two executives had unexpectedly appeared at Julian's office. His computer was confiscated, his access badges deactivated. He was escorted from the building carrying a somber cardboard box of desk plants and family photos. By afternoon, rumors were circulating about financial irregularities and an internal investigation. By evening, Julian was calling Diana nonstop, leaving increasingly panicked voicemails about misunderstandings and how they needed to talk. She played one for me, his voice high-pitched and strained with stress. Diana, please, it's not what it looks like. I can explain everything. Call me back. First blood drawn. But we were just getting started. It's remarkable how swiftly a life can unravel when the right threads are pulled. Julian certainly did. Within 48 hours of our anonymous tip, his company had initiated a full internal investigation. By the end of the week, they brought in forensic accountants and outside counsel. Seriously. They weren't merely covering their backs. They were building a strong case. Meanwhile, my divorce proceedings accelerated due to rock-solid evidence of infidelity involving misused marital assets. Jessica dismantled Seraph in the initial hearing, presenting the affair timeline with hotel receipts and texts, then emphasizing the financial impact. Your Honor, Mr. Weber's wife wasn't merely committing adultery. She was actively spending marital funds to do so. The defendant's lover, currently under investigation for embezzlement, was using company money to finance their relationship. The judge simply nodded while taking notes. Seraph's young lawyer attempted to argue the affair was irrelevant to dividing assets, but Jessica shut him down instantly. Her lover is under criminal investigation for embezzlement used to fund their affair, directly impacting financial discovery. That captured the judge's attention, who promptly ordered expedited financial discovery and a swift divorce timeline. Seraph sat there looking stunned, as if this couldn't possibly be happening to her. Welcome to consequences, dear. Outside the courtroom, Seraph tried to approach me, her eyes red and swollen. I simply walked past her to Jessica's office for a debrief. The look of rejection on Seraph's face almost made the wasted 6 years of marriage worthwhile. Over the next few weeks, Julian's situation deteriorated from bad to catastrophic. Diana kept me updated through her sources at his company. The initial investigation had uncovered even more financial irregularities beyond what we'd sent them. It turned out our anonymous tip was just the beginning of unraveling years of fraud. One evening at a diner far from our usual haunts, didn't want to encounter mutual friends, Diana showed me an email from her lawyer. The company's investigation had expanded to include all executives who had approved Julian's expenses. 3 VPs were now on administrative leave. The SEC had formally initiated an investigation. "He's completely finished," she said, a faint smile playing at her lips. "His lawyer called mine today, attempting to negotiate our divorce settlement. Suddenly, he's willing to give me everything just to finalize it before his assets potentially get frozen." A smart move on Diana's part. Finalizing her divorce before criminal charges meant she could secure assets that might otherwise be tied up for years. Her lawyer was pushing for the house, both cars, all their liquid investments, and monthly support. Julian was so desperate to settle quickly that he was agreeing to all of it. Meanwhile, Seraph was spiraling. She'd been placed on administrative leave from her job, pending an investigation into her knowledge of Julian's activities. Apparently, some of those client meetings she'd attended with Julian were now part of the fraud investigation. She was barraging my phone with increasingly frantic messages. "Please call me. I need to explain. This is all a misunderstanding. Julian told me those were legitimate business trips. They're investigating me at work. I could lose my job. Please help me." I forwarded everything to Jessica, without responding. Each message only strengthened our case that Seraph had been involved in Julian's schemes, even if only as an unwitting participant. The hammer finally dropped on Julian 3 weeks after our tip. He was arrested at his temporary apartment. Diana had evicted him from their house the day she filed for divorce, on multiple charges of wire fraud, embezzlement, and falsifying business records. His perfectly styled hair was a mess. His designer suit replaced by a rumpled button-down. How the mighty fall. Seraph wasn't arrested, but she was formally interviewed by both company investigators and law enforcement. Jessica obtained a copy of her statement through discovery. She claimed complete ignorance, stating she thought all those trips and dinners were legitimate business activities. Perhaps she was lying. Perhaps she was just that naive. Either way, she was collateral damage in Julian's downfall. She was fired the next day. Loss of confidence was the official reason. Translation: "We don't believe you didn't know, but we can't prove it, so we're simply letting you go instead of risking more negative publicity." With her income gone and legal bills accumulating, Seraph finally ceased fighting the divorce. Her lawyer reached out to Jessica, proposing a settlement that essentially gave me everything I desired. I kept the condo, my retirement accounts, investments, and most of our joint savings. She received her car, personal items, and enough cash for a small apartment. It was more generous than she deserved, but I just wanted it concluded. The day we signed the final papers was surreal. 6 years of marriage ended with signatures on a stack of documents. Seraph looked like a ghost. Thin, pale, wearing something off the rack. She kept attempting to make eye contact, probably hoping for some last-minute forgiveness or, at least, acknowledgement. I offered her nothing. That night, Diana and I celebrated at an upscale restaurant downtown, far from anywhere we'd gone with our exes. We'd both finalized our divorces within days of each other. Both emerged with our lives relatively intact, while Julian and Seraph's lives crumbled. "To justice," Diana said, raising her glass. "And to whatever comes next." Over dinner, we discussed everything except our exes, her plans to restart her accounting career, my new project at work, a trip she was planning to the coast. It felt good to talk about the future instead of the past. At some point, I realized I was genuinely enjoying myself for the first time in months. When I dropped her off at her place, formerly hers and Julian's before she secured it in the divorce, there was a moment of awkwardness at the door. We'd been allies in conflict, but now the conflict was over. What were we to each other now? "Would you like to come in for coffee?" she asked. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't sure if we were ready, if I was ready. "Just coffee," she added with a small smile. "We've both endured enough drama for one lifetime." I accepted. As we sat on our couch talking into the early hours, something shifted. A couple of weeks later, we went on our first date, and I felt like maybe, just maybe, this whole catastrophe had led me somewhere better than where I'd begun. It's been 6 months since everything transpired. Many of you requested an update on the Julian/Seraph disaster. Seriously, folks, you wanted to know what happened. Get your popcorn ready. First, Julian. Remember the embezzling jerk in designer loafers? He's currently sporting a lovely jumpsuit in minimum security prison. He accepted a plea deal, 5 years, substantial restitution payments, and a permanent ban from finance. His company conducted a full audit and discovered he'd stolen nearly $400,000 over 4 years. His sentencing made the local business journal. They used his old headshot from the company website alongside his mugshot. The contrast is exquisite. From a Tom Ford suit to wearing orange is quite the fashion journey. As for Seraph, a complete freefall. After being fired, she couldn't secure another marketing job. It turns out being associated with a major embezzlement scandal isn't beneficial for a resume. Last I heard, she's working retail at a mall in the suburbs. Her Instagram transitioned from exotic vacations and champagne brunches to inspirational quotes and pictures of her parents' cat. Diana is thriving.